Mike, firstly, welcome back to Beyond the Title. It feels like a lifetime ago since our first podcast. How was lockdown for you, and how did it feel pioneering at the online concert with your amazing daughter, Meg?
Well, I mean, obviously, the lockdown came as such a shock to everybody, and my younger daughter Meg just happened to be finishing a course at E15 acting school, and we said to her, "Come back to us for your last two terms, rather than, be locked down in Southend. Come back to us." And of course, she's like a little whirling dervish and wanted to play, if you like. And we came up with this idea of putting this little Instagram live concert each Sunday lockdown with Meg, and it was quite fun. It was great for me. I mean, it started off as her idea, of course, and it remained her idea. But she very quickly co-opted her dad in to play piano and sometimes play guitar and sometimes sing along as well. So it was actually quite good for me to keep my chops going and actually do a few things. Yes, I did really enjoy it, and I'm very proud of Meg for instigating the whole thing.
Yeah, available from the city lockdown and the city as well. And from a big
There are quite a few lockdown things that were set up in theatres. Did you ever think of taking it to a larger scale?
It would have been. I mean, we could have done that, but the opportunity didn't arise, so it didn't happen. I mean, I was very impressed with how so many people dealt with their own particular demons in lockdown, and some people were able to do kind of sometimes quite extraordinary things. There were all sorts of actor friends who I saw, being publicised as joining Amazon, doing, anything to make a buck for their family. Because as we know, the entertainment industry was basically, for a year and a half at least, kind of zilch. There was nothing going on. I kind of, at my great age of 65 now, 64, well, 65, just gone 65, I'm kind of in that much more able to deal with it situation. But if it had happened 20 years ago, when the mortgage was at its peak and all that stuff was going, I don't know what I would have done, quite frankly. Very difficult for so many people.
Now, they say that everyone has a book in them. Having had the pleasure of knowing you for the best part of a decade, you're always very humble about your achievements. So why did you feel now was the right time to put your life on paper?
Well, I suppose it does come down to a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, of what you do in lockdown. And I'd done a couple of podcasts with some other friends as well. And one of the things that came up in those podcasts was, why don't you write down, some of the things that have happened to you, some of the crazy exploits and crazy gigs and crazy concerts and the amazing people that I've had the fortune of working with. Why don't you write it down? So I started, I think it was the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And I started writing stuff down, basically, for my two daughters, for Lily and Meg, so that in the future they'll have a little record of dad, what dad did, and it kind of snowballed from there, if you like. And so I think by the time I'd got to 50,000 words or something, I was nowhere near through. I think I was still in the sort of 80s or 90s. So it was like, oh, maybe I better carry on and do this properly. So I did, and managed to finish the first draft in August, I think it was, 2021. and then started editing. And as you know, Josh, from your own writing, you look back at it all and you edit and re-edit and cut and sort out, and then you have to proofread, and then you have to find a publisher, and oh gosh, it takes forever, But I was very lucky, and I've got myself a publisher, and as we know, it comes out on the 28th of June.
So, Turn Around and Take a Bow is the name of the book. Were there any other titles in the running? Don't forget, the baton doesn't make a noise.
Well, exactly. I always say the baton never makes a noise. Of course, that is one of my sayings. But seriously, when I first started writing it, the title that was in my head was Where is One? Okay, which has a double meaning, which is obviously where am I? Where is one? Where am I? What have I done? But it's also, in musical terms, where is one is what an orchestra frequently gently cries to itself when they don't know where the hell their conductor is in terms of the number of beats in the bar. Or where is one in the sense of when you see a conductor conducting in four. So and the orchestra, it's so complicated, the orchestra play generally, if they're playing classical music, the orchestra will play late to the one beat. They'll play late to the beat. So they'll go, if you can imagine that I'll try and make a click noise, which is where my finger would be on the one. So one, that's the sort of, so there's one and one, but the orchestra would play one, 2, 3, 4. So they would play after the beat. It's very complicated and very difficult, and that's why I didn't use that as the title. So I ended up, I thought, what I did was I remembered an old conductor joke, and the old conductor joke goes like this, and I'm so bad at telling jokes, but I'll try anyway. So it's the first time that a certain conductor has stood in front of an orchestra, and the orchestra have put a piece of paper in front of him on top of the score. Okay, and the piece of paper reads thus: wave your arms around until the music stops, then turn around and take a bow. Yeah. So that's the basic tenet of the idea, that and that actually corresponds a little bit to, and the baton doesn't make a noise as well.
So do you think anyone could become a conductor, or do they need to have like an ear for what they're doing?
Well, there have been a couple of programs, haven't there, where various celebrities have sort of taken a baton, and the people who've done best are those people who have a musical ear, they don't need to necessarily, in that context, they don't need to necessarily be a great reader of music, but in terms of the celebrity thing and whether they can wave their arms around at the right time, it's to do with how you feel music and how you can convey music. Of course, if you're going to stand up in front of professional musicians, then you need to be able to answer any question that they might give you, and you need to be able to have the authority to know, so that they understand that you know what you're doing. An orchestra is a very, very fine leveler of people, and they will find any Achilles heel that you might have very, very quickly. And yes, I'm going to go back on that. I'm going to say anybody can stand in front of an orchestra and anybody can wave their arms around, but only a few of us lucky ones have the chance of making music when we do so?
As I said in the introduction, since we last spoke on the podcast, you've had a tough time with your health, but thankfully you beat it. However, how was this able to give you a whole new perspective on your achievements in life?
Well, I think, because 2018, if I just briefly mention it, 2018, I had tongue and throat cancer, and I had some fairly unpleasant treatment to eradicate it, which I'm happy to say has thus far worked. So that's the first, a good thing. What having cancer did was made me completely think about what life really means. Because if when you're suddenly faced with your own mortality, you do inevitably think about what are those things that are important. And of course music is important, and of course work and all that sort of stuff is important, but it's nowhere near as important as family and life. That's and I suppose if anything has come out of that, then what has come out is that I feel much more able to say no to things now, and I'm starting to think about a much more relaxed life where I do the things that I want to do with the people I want to do them with.
Yeah, that's one thing that Josh never really talks about in any of his podcasts. He obviously celebrates the careers of his guests, but doesn't talk about that other personal side, as it were, of life itself. And that must have been a real, what do you say? No.
Home for you.
Yeah, that must have brought it home for you.
Well, I think we all have a persona, if you like, a mask that we exist behind in our professional life, and suddenly the mask that I had to deal with was the mask that I had to wear for radiotherapy, to have the radio, and suddenly that brought everything into stark contrast, and what really is what am I? Yeah, what am I? What am I doing? What should I be doing? What can I do to help more? What can I do that's... Yeah, it just opened up all sorts of new and interesting ideas and thoughts, but it made me more than anything else in the world. It made me realise how important family and friends are.
I listened to a recent podcast with you and our mutual friend, the great Colin Edmonds, where you said that your three heroes were Phil Silvers, Eric Morecambe, and Andre Previn. What was it about these figures which inspired you? Apart from Previn, these figures weren't necessarily connected with music, so was there ever a time when your passions lay elsewhere?
Well, it's a funny one, isn't it? Eric Morecambe, as I was growing up, Morecambe and Wise were all the great Christmas specials. In fact, the Christmas special with Andre Previn, of course, was one of the most amazing moments ever in the history of television. Possibly is the most amazing moment in the history of television. So the whole sort of comedy thing was there for me. Phil Silvers was all about Sergeant Bilko because that was one of the first programs that I remember watching as a kid, and laughing out loud sometimes at. And I suppose there was a period of time in my teens when, along with music, I was also doing some sort of performance stuff at school. And there sadly was one show that myself and a few friends put on where we thought we might be the next Monty Python. We absolutely weren't. We thought we might be, but it's one of those moments where I look back and I go, did we really do that on stage? I mean, I cannot tell you how bad we must have been. It must have been awful to watch. But anyway, I tried and then failed. And then, obviously music and being the other side of the screen or the other side of the stage was the thing that I much preferred being. I still love going to see various funny people do their thing. So, and I remember years and years ago, I went to see the late great Bob Monkhouse do his stand-up at the Swansea Grand, and at the point that I went to see him, he was still Mr. Entertainment on telly, Mr. Golden Shot and all those sorts of things, but witnessing him do his stand-up was still is one of the funniest moments that I have ever seen. He was just extraordinary, and obviously Colin, as the holder of Bob Monkhouse's joke books, is probably the best person in the world to know just how brilliant Bob Monkhouse was. But going back to Eric Morecambe and Phil Silvers, and then Andre Previn, I kind of love the mixture of those three people, and funnily enough, Andre Previn, if you read his book, which is called No Minor Chords, which is basically about his time in Hollywood, and it's called No Minor Chords because one of the heads of the studio came up one day and said about one particular movie, what is it, what chord is that about this one particular movie, and it was a minor chord, and so he said, well, it just makes me feel too sad, and it's totally wrong, so we're not having any minor chords in any of our music. So they made a little plaque to go in the composer's room which said no minor chords, which of course is complete nonsense because you have to have major and minor chords to make anything work. But there we are. So yes, Eric Morecambe, Phil Silvers, and Andre Previn, and the list could go on forever, but those would be my three.
So going back to Bob Monkhouse, Josh always sees him as the heart of entertainment. With you having a musical background, how do you see that, and how do you appreciate that?
Well, I think it's helped in my understanding or being able to work, because over the years I've worked with people like Bradley Walsh and Joe Pasquale and and Tarby, Jimmy Tarbuck, and who else? Oh, and in terms of writing, both David Baddiel and Ben Elton. So I guess having a small understanding of how comedy works has helped me, because sometimes if you're creating a routine for somebody, a musical routine for somebody, you might need to. It's not that you're trying to make a musical joke out of something, but you might tramp. If there's a joke within the lyric, then you might make the music tramp all over the payoff of the gag. So you have to be very aware when you're working with those sorts of people, where to be in and where to be out. Yeah, and where to leave the space for the audience to get something, or the audience to, yeah. Does that answer the question? I think it does.
I think so, yeah. We all have influential people in our lives who help shape us. How significant was your music teacher, Trevor Farrow, in shaping your determination to have a career in music?
Well, I talk about this in the book, and I think I was humongously lucky that I went to this school in Plymouth called Devonport High School, where this young desert boot, corduroy trouser or corduroy jacket wearing 20, I think he was, when I joined that school, I was 11 and he would have been 25. He was quite new as a teacher. So, and he was the music teacher at my grammar school. And he just inspired and was able to make music. Although I already had an inkling that music was where I was wanting to go, but he was able to show me just how all forms of music have a place. It wasn't a case of we're doing a music lesson now, so we have to do classical. It was we're doing a music lesson now, so let's play a little bit of some prog rock, or let's play a little bit of rock and roll, let's play a little bit of classical, yes, and let's do some singing, and let's do this. But it was always a complete conglomeration of different styles. So I thank him for giving me that eclectic understanding and appreciation of music, and also that he allowed me as a young, because as I got older in school, and there were like 3 or 4 of us who were quite good at music, so we would find ourselves down in the music room quite a lot, really just getting into doing a bit more work, doing a bit more practice, doing a bit more listening, getting a bit more out of Trev as well. He introduced me to orchestral music. He used to conduct the Plymouth Youth Orchestra, so I used to go and try and play the oboe, which again is not something that anybody else would want to hear, but I did try. And I just, there are so many people who talk about how important one teacher was to them in their life. I can honestly say I'm one of those lucky people who had someone who inspired and gave me such and joy out of music.
What would he say?
What would you say to him now if you met him or saw him?
Well, funnily enough, because we have kept in touch, because I played for his retirement down in Plymouth. That's about 15 years ago now. Is it? Yes, about 15 years ago, because I think he's 80 this year. So I've promised him that I'll go and see him in July when I'm down in the West Country. But so I kind of, when I saw him at his retirement, I was able to say thank you at that point, because I went in they did a kind of "This Is Your Life" for him as a surprise, and so I was one of the sort of hidden and surprise guests, and I was able to say a thank you to him, at that point. But he'd seen, some of the mad things that I'd done, and he had, he knew that I'd sort of made it okay in the business. So.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, free.
Are you going to give him a free copy of the book?
I am going to. Yes, I am. I am. It's the simple answer. Yes.
So, Aspects of Love proved a significant part of your career. What did you learn from this?
Aspects was sort of 1989, and I'd been asked originally to be assistant musical director on it, and then after 3 or 4 weeks, it became apparent that the person who was the musical director had to be gently moved out, and I was asked to take over. Aspects gave me the first long-running show that I was involved in, because I'd had, up to that point, through the 80s, I'd done lots of West End shows, lots of touring shows, but they were all very short, and much shorter than you would have liked them to have been. Shows that were cut off after 6 weeks or 12 weeks, or a tour that was only going to be 4 months anyway. But Aspects, suddenly I was presented with a long-term show. I ended up conducting the show for 2 years. It started my relationship with Andrew Lloyd Webber, and the person who I have to thank for all that was one of my mentors whilst I was going through the 80s. Another musical director, a man called Mike Reed. Not Mike Reed the actor or Mike Reed the DJ. This is Mike Reed, REED, who is a musical director. Used to be Tommy Steele's musical director, was the original conductor of Phantom of the Opera. So Mike had already worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber on Phantom, and Mike was asked to be musical supervisor of Aspects, and he asked me to be assistant on Aspects, and that's then what happened. I was assistant and took over from the musical director who was cut out. But Aspects was a very difficult show because it was a completely through-sung show, no dialogue. It was sung the whole way through, so there was music from beginning to end, and it also was a show that one of the few times that Andrew's written a show without a rhythm section. So it wasn't like, a piano, bass and drums, or piano, guitar, bass and drums at all. It was all about a little chamber ensemble. So it was string quartet and French horn and clarinet and flute and a little bit of percussion and a piano and a little bit of keyboards. So it was very much it was a bit more. What I'd previously done in my career was much more mainstream musical theatre or pop-based musical theatre, and this was a proper bit of sort of classical based musical theatre, if that makes sense. I mean, Aspects is not classical, obviously, it's Andrew Lloyd Webber, but it has that sort of Puccini-esque, opera-esque. You can drive. I discovered that I could drive the show. I could actually become emotionally, if I was emotionally involved with the characters on stage, and then I could actually become part of and really help to make the audience understand what was going on. Because if I didn't engage and if I just let the music wash, then I was not. Well, everybody just did this. It just relaxed too much. But if I as musical director stayed absolutely 100% with each character and lived what they were singing as they were singing it, then that conveyed itself to the audience by a drive-through of the whole music. And it was really quite fascinating. I had no idea at that point that we could be as motivational, if you like, as much of a driving force. But it was a really, really fascinating thing to do.
I just, yeah.
I don't want you to dish the dirt on anyone in particular, but were there performers that were better than that than others?
Well, over the years, or just about aspects.
Just aspects, really, because when you're in that role, I suppose it's better for you if you know that the performers know exactly what they're doing and where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, there is one little story that I actually didn't put in the book. There was one moment where one of the it's a long run. Okay, that's the first thing to say. It's a long run, and when you're doing a long run, you kind of, both performers and orchestra and everybody gets to certain sort of plateaus where, and you sometimes find yourself relaxing on the plateau and forgetting that the audience is watching it for the first time. So that's really hard sometimes to make your performance, whether it's on stage or in the pit, your performance fresh. And so there was one actor, and I won't tell you his name, and I absolutely roasted this particular actor after the show because he had just walked through the whole section, the whole part of the show that he was in. He just walked through it, and I really was hugely upset at him, and then spool forward to I was doing a concert in the festival hall in, I think, about 2014, 2015, and he ended up being one of those actors in this concert that I was doing, and we had a really nice sort of meeting together. And he said, "Mike, I know you were so upset at me when I was doing, aspects and all that, and I want to tell you that when you did shout at me and when you did say all those things, it really made me think, and I was a young actor learning my craft and all the rest of it, and what you said to me has really stayed with me all the time, and ever since in my so I was really chuffed about that, actually, that because there was a part of me that regretted having bawled him out, but then to be told that actually it had stood him in good stead was probably a good thing.
And when we know what you're doing, it's according to every seven but when they're young.
Yeah, when yourself, what you're doing, it's great for those younger people to be surrounded by more experienced heads like yourself, so you can actually advise them, have a positive impact on them.
Yeah. I think that's right, and I think sometimes it's not often in my career that I've had to lay down the law to somebody. I try not to have a confrontational kind of way of working. But in a way, I'm quite glad that I did do that to that guy because of the result.
You've spoken many times about your involvement in the Royal Variety performance, and I don't want to cover old ground, but how did this elevate your status within the West End and open you up to opportunities which arguably might have been more difficult to obtain?
Well, interestingly, the last time we talked about the Royal Varieties, I don't think we ever talked about how I got into the Royal Varieties. But it's actually because of Aspects that I got into doing Royal Varieties. Because whilst I was doing Aspects, Andrew came just before one show, had a little meeting with me, and said that there was going to be this would be 1989. So he said that there's going to be a sort of Andrew Lloyd Webber segment in the Royal Variety this year, and will you look after it? Will you be musical supervisor for it and look after it? And so suddenly that was my very first involvement with the Royal. 2 years later, I was assistant musical director, and 2 years after that, I was musical director for it. So it was kind of thanks to Andrew that I sort of started doing Royals. And actually, what came out of the Royals was then an involvement with some ITV bigwigs, and even though the Royal Varieties that I did were always ITV shows, I also got contacts at the BBC through doing those shows as well. So it's funny when you think about it. If all the Royal stuff and all the telly stuff came out of me doing Aspects of Love. If I hadn't done Aspects, I wouldn't have been asked to do that first, be involved in that first. I hadn't really thought about that before. But I think when I was writing the book, I sort of, all the sort of bits of the jigsaw kind of made sense, which is another reason why it's quite a good thing for anybody to write down stuff and try and put it together and see what the journey of your life has been.
Yeah. You never about and how they were.
Yeah, because you never really think about all the bits and how they're put together, really.
Sorry, say that again.
Because you never really think about the bits and pieces and how they all go together. And
no, exactly. Exactly. It's only when you take stock and you start to, oh yeah, so if that hadn't happened, that wouldn't have happened, and all that. The way that our lives are seemingly random, but then when you look back, you go, yes, there was a pathway. There was a pathway that I seem to be finding myself on.
I had to what
If Josh had never watched the Royal Variety documentary, then he would never have met you.
Exactly. There were those ones where I was talking about the Shirley Bassey one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So you've directed some of the world's most accomplished performers, from Julie Andrews to Lady Gaga. What's the hardest thing about working with big names?
Oh, big names. Well, I suppose, first of all, the entertainment industry is frequently a great leveler. And if you're working with somebody, then you're both exposed. And so what I've always found is that the best thing that I can do is to try my best to make the person I work with feel like they're the best. Does that make sense? I do remember. I have to tell you this story. I do mention this in the book. I Julie Andrews was asked to be the voice of Polynesia in Doctor Dolittle when we did it in 1998 with Philip Schofield playing Doctor Dolittle. And Leslie Brickus, the great and wonderful Leslie Brickus, who sadly died last October, Leslie, he said to me, "Well, look, I know Julie really well. Why don't I see if she'll come in and record Polynesia?" So that was absolutely fantastic. She turned up in the rehearsal room and started sort of mingling and all the rest of it. And then a little bit later on in the day, she came and sat down beside me at the piano, and we started playing through it wasn't My Friend the Doctor. It was one of the other songs. Anyway, doesn't matter what song it was. She was singing a few lines in it, and I'm sitting at the piano playing this through with her sitting next to me, and I just suddenly stopped, and she looked at me and went, "What?" And I said, "You're Julie Andrews." And I'm just me, and I just can't quite believe it. And how lovely it is to be here with you. And she put her hand on my knee and said, "I'm loving it too." And we carried on. It was absolutely brilliant. So some of that, some of the artists that you work with, they obviously turn up with expectations, and sometimes they can be a little bit tricky, and you have to sometimes duck the arrows as they get slung. But most of the time, if you work on the premise that they are as concerned or nervous or anxious about making sure that they do the best that they can, and if they realize that you're concerned and anxious and you want to make sure that they do the best that they can, then things tend to be okay. I mean, with Dame Shirley, case in point, it was always, when in my was it 6 years or whatever it was with Dame Shirley, that I always felt that she knew that I was there for her, and that's how we managed to get on. So
And they need you as much as you need them.
Yeah, and they need you just as much as you need them.
yeah, well, yes, I suppose. I mean, what you must never do is show them how nervous you are, because that ends up being a hiding to nothing. Because if they feel that you're not up to it in some way, then that will make them more anxious. So there's always a sense of, and I suppose there's a sense of that's what I was talking about earlier, that there's usually this mask. You have this mask in front of you, this mask of professionalism, and at the end of every gig, you then turn around and go, "I got away with it again." So there's that kind of thing, and I know there are not just musicians. There are actors, comics, all sorts of people who at the end of every gig go, "Phew, got away with it." That and the most professional people will say, "Got away with it again," because you never believe that you're good enough, because you're always trying to be better.
Your mum, Jean, comes across as the most amazing woman. You've told me before that it was through your parents' influence that you learned your sense of manners. How did this give you the tools to help you negotiate arising situations as an MD?
I think my parents, mum was very much, home roost and all that sort of stuff. But mum was brilliant at keeping relationships with friends and relations, and people would come down and stay with us down in Plymouth, and somehow we'd fit them into the little 2 up 2 down house that we lived in Kiev. So Mum was just always very conscious of keeping friends near, and keeping a relationship with friends. So that was good. Dad was ended up working at Farley's Infant Foods and ended up being the union rep, and managing to stop a number of times. I believe he managed to stop Farley's going out on strike, or the main workforce going out on strike, because Dad had this inherent sense. Well, he had an inherent sense of right and wrong, which is what I've got from both Mum and Dad, absolutely. But he also had this diplomacy thing about him, and he was so good at making, so this is what you think and this is what you think, so let's see if we can find a way of melding those two ideas, and see, rather than you're entrenched in this idea and you're entrenched in, let's see if we can put the two ideas together and find a way through. So Dad's modus operandi was always keep talking. It was always keep talking. And he also, there was another thing that Dad used to do, which I always remember because it's a good leveler. When he would go cheers to you with a glass, he would put the glass first of all above your glass, never above you, and then he'd put it underneath, never below you, and then he'd chink, always with you. So never above you, never below you, chink, always with you, which is quite good. It's a really lovely, it's about being, nobody's better than anybody else. Nobody's bigger, nobody should be more important in that way. Everybody should be able to get along and make sense. So I'm lucky that I had all those, those good things from Mum. I know the diplomacy thing is certainly a good thing to have from Dad, because I've used that a number of times.
Growing up in Plymouth, was there a big contrast in living conditions between your childhood in Plymouth to the beating heart of the West End? What conclusions did you draw on about the significance of Plymouth in making you the person you are?
Yeah, Plymouth. I think first of all, I loved being in Plymouth. I loved growing up in Plymouth, because Plymouth has the great thing about Plymouth is that you're really close to Cornwall, you're really close to Dartmoor, you're really close to all sorts of lovely, lovely places. There are certain places in Plymouth that are a bit unpleasant. There are also some places in Plymouth that are a bit extraordinary. I was very lucky. I went to a really fantastic school where, of course, I'd met Trev and a load of other people as well, but where I'd had this fantastic teacher in Trev Farrow. But I think I always knew from my sort of musical escapades with people that I wanted to get away. I wanted to, go up to the smoke, as it used to be called, going up to London, and I tried to do as many. I got involved in the Devon Youth Orchestra, Plymouth Youth Orchestra, and then when the chance came to go to music college, because it was going to be music college rather than university. I did toy with university, but it was like, no, music college is more about hands-on music, so I want to do that. I was so excited when I got up to London. I remember being, I think I was about 14 when I went. There was a big trip from our Plymouth Youth Orchestra up to see Belshazzar's Feast by William Walton in the Royal Albert Hall, which is a big monster of a piece, with full orchestra, huge choir, soloist, and it's so exciting. And I, as a 14-year-old, going up there, and I remember going into, you get off the coach and you sort of make your way into the Royal Albert Hall, and Josh, have you been in the Albert Hall? Yeah. So you walk in, and it just seems so vast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
you know. And I remember that feeling of, oh my God, this is incredible. I wonder if I can be here. I wonder if I can, you know, I never really thought, I wonder if I can conduct here, even though now, of course, I have a few times. But I suppose it gave me a sense of wonder about this amazing place up the line called London, and I wanted to go there.
So, how many years have you take over home? You remember that moment?
So when you first conducted at the Royal Albert Hall, did you then remember that moment?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I did. I really did. And I can't remember what it was I was doing, but I'd remember it was about halfway through the first half of whatever it was, and I suddenly had this wave of memory, of nostalgia, of, and I also, that sort of sudden sort of getting all fluttery and all the rest of it, and I had to sort of take some deep breaths, take some deep breaths while I was conducting to get control of myself again. Yeah, so it was amazing. Yeah.
When I was in our home, then so much.
When Josh went to Royal Albert Hall, Len Goodman stole his seat.
How dare that lovely Len Good? Dare.
It was at school that you saw your headmaster play the Hebrides Overture as you came into assembly on the record player. What effect did this have on you?
Well, yes, that was primary school. That was which was brilliant because I had this. I mean, I know we've talked about Trev Farrow in my grammar school, but in my primary school, which was a little school in Devonport called Drake Primary School, I had this lovely headmaster called Mr. Parrish, and very frequently, it wasn't every day, but very frequently, the music that was playing as we came in for school assembly was the Hebrides Overture, Fingal's Cave by Mendelssohn. And it kind of, I suppose, stayed as one of my favourite pieces. And then I was able, on one of the Friday night music nights that I did quite early on, I was able to say, oh, could we do Fingal's Cave? Could we do the Hebrides Overture? Because I'd love to do it. And I'd never done it before. And so I remember standing on that particular occasion and going, oh my goodness me, this is, I can remember me, the little 6-year-old me, walking into school assembly and hearing this music, and here I am standing in front of this wonderful orchestra, the BBC Concert Orchestra, and we're creating this music. So that was a nice thing. I think the effect of that, because also Mr. Parrish was the one who I got my first piano from. But you'll have to read the book to discover how I got that first piano. No, he was a very, very, yeah. Listen, I have been so lucky to have such amazing teachers.
I did. I did. Anna. So we for that free.
He didn't put the piano story in for that exact reason.
Ah, very good.
So what message do you want the reader to take away from the book?
What message? That's a really difficult question, isn't it? Because obviously, You know, when you start writing a book about yourself, it's a bit because you're sort of letting everything out. I suppose what I would most want to say is that with a little bit of application and a little bit of a little bit of ability, you can achieve all sorts of extraordinary things. And I've over the course of my 40 odd year career, I have, I found myself conducting Royal Variety shows, conducting big shows in the London Palladium, going all around the world, working with all sorts of iconic and amazing people. And it sounds so cliched to say, but I can do, because I've been able to do that, then with that application, you can. So I suppose I also want to show that it's kind of, it's normal. How can it be normal doing the stupid thing that I do? But for me, that sense of going out and waving my arms around and everybody having a good time is just brilliant. I'm so happy that I've been able to do that. The fact that I had the big old lump of cancer in 2018, and then we've had COVID, and now I'm thinking of relaxing stuff anyway. I think all that is important, but I think the main thing about reading the book, if you do read the book, is the joy that I've had from music. There, how's that?
So where can people buy a copy of the book?
Well, it is at all. You will be able to order it from all good bookstores, and you can get it from Amazon and on the Troubadour Troubadour are the publishers under their imprint Matador. So if you search, I think if you search Troubadour books, but you can get it. Shall I read out the website for you?
Yeah.
I'll have to get it. Hang on a second. But it's quite straightforward because it is troubadour.co.uk, and then you search bookshop. How's that?
And you can pre-order it.
And
you can pre-order it.
And you can pre-order. Oh yes, indeed. Yes, you can.
Yes, he's pre-ordered it.
Thank you, Josh. I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. I thank you. Listen. I'm under no illusions. I am not a famous person. I've worked with lots of amazing people, and this is not. It's not going to be a bestseller. But if it does sell a few, then that would be wonderful. And I hope that some people will enjoy following the journey of my life and the weird and wonderful things that I've done and the little jokes that have happened on the way.
It's about your time. It's more about time is something alone you got
Yeah, it's not about the fame, it's about your time in entertainment, which entertainment's fading away, and now you've got a lovely record of it.
Yeah, and there's also a mention of a certain Josh Barry in it as well.
Oh no, don't say that.
Yeah. There's
Does he need to get his lawyers involved?
Does he need to get? Oh, bless you. There we are.
There's one more question. The final one is, what's next for Mike Dixon?
Well, I am doing a concert in Malta in the first week of July. A big concert. I did one last year. It was for the BBC, but I'm doing a big one, and it's all sorts of big. What are we doing? We're doing a concert of great, a whole mixture of music, but it's all the sort of the songs that have achieved, that are from groups and people who have achieved over 100 million record sales. I think we start at around 100 million and then work up to 250 million to 300 million record sales. So it's a concert of extraordinary music, including, of course, Bohemian Rhapsody, because Bohemian Rhapsody has to be in it, full stop. So yeah, so that's the next thing, and there might be a little TV series as well. But I'm just relaxing. How can I be relaxing? But I am relaxing.
So the partly my
So the baton is still making a noise, even though it doesn't actually make a noise.
Yeah. The baton never makes the noise. Very good. Very good.
Thank you very much for today, Mike.
Thank you, dear Josh. Thank you.